A warm June breeze, filled with the scent of fresh greenery, gently stroked Lily's cheeks as she leaned over, planting delicate seedlings with bright flowers near an old oak gazebo. At the request of Robert Lawrence, the elderly owner of the luxurious mansion, she was restoring the flower bed that his late wife had once adored. Dear friends, I want to get to know those who are listening to me right now. Please write down which city or state you are from. It is very important and interesting for me to get to know my audience better. Enjoy the listening, everyone. The garden was vast, and the old billionaire often used the professional services of the young gardener. Lily loved her work, the solitude, the silence, and after some time, the visible result, wonderful and unique every time. She wanted to put her soul into every new sprout. It was her small corner of peace in this huge, chaotic world. The sharp screech of tires silenced the chirping birds. Lily, crouching on the path by the flower bed, flinched and looked up. With a flash of its chrome side, a black sports car pulled into the carport. Edward, the young master and son of Robert Lawrence, stepped slowly out of the car, slammed the door, and without looking where he was going, headed toward the house, discussing something intently on his phone. Listen, this is just ridiculous. You're asking me to pay for this? I could do a better job myself. Lily watched him approach, one hand pressing the phone to his ear, the other gesturing as he looked around. He stepped past and stopped 3 feet away from her. Lily lowered her eyes to her flowers and froze. Right on top of her seedlings was the clear print of a polished boot. The peat pots were crushed flat, and the young sprouts were broken. Everything inside her tightened with pity. She had put so much work into these flowers, and just like that, with one careless step, they were destroyed. Edward finished his phone call and looked down at his soiled boot, then slowly shifted his gaze to the rows of flower pots, bags of fertilizer, and the laid-out gardening tools. His expression darkened, and he looked down at the seated girl. "What kind of excavation work are you doing here? You scattered trash all over the path. Why didn't you warn me?" he snapped. "Look at this, I've ruined my Santonis." Lily, unable to contain her emotions, jumped up. She tried to keep herself composed, but her heart was pounding with resentment. "It's not trash," she replied, pointing to the damaged seedlings. "These are the plants I'm setting out, and you just trampled them." Edward slipped his phone into his pocket, lifted his sunglasses, and looked at Lily as if she herself were a bag of fertilizer. "I don't care what they are. I care about why I have to walk through the mud you've made here." Lily was stunned. Where did such malicious arrogance come from? Could a simple remark have offended him so much? A wave of indignation rose in her chest. He was being so unfair. "But this is my job, and don't you think you should look where you're going?" she exclaimed, feeling her voice tremble. Edward smirked. "What kind of job is this? Any fool can poke a hole in the ground with a shovel and stick flowers in it. Basically, you gardeners do nothing but move dirt from one place to another." Lily could no longer hold back. The words she wanted to say burst out. "What do you know? You're just a rich boy who's had everything handed to him on a silver platter. You walk around with a self-important look and just wag your tongue. Try growing something yourself before you claim it's easy." Edward laughed sharply with a challenge. "Fine, ground digger. Let's make a bet. I'll prove to you that your job isn't worth a dime. If the flowers I plant right now in front of you survive," he fixed her with a spiteful glare, "then tomorrow you will come to my charity gala and speak before the guests. You'll have to wag your tongue well enough to make all those cheapskates open their wallets." Lily felt her cheeks flush. It was an outrageous challenge. "But to see if the plants have taken root, you need at least—" The girl tried to object. "Stop," the young wealthy man interrupted. A smug grin was frozen on his face. "Excuses. Are you scared? Afraid my work will be better than yours?" Lily lifted her chin. Her eyes burned with approaching tears. She couldn't let him treat her this way, to devalue her labor so much. "No," she exclaimed. "I'm not scared." "Perfect." Edward squeezed her hand, sealing the deal with a handshake. His mocking smile was radiant. "It's a deal then." The rich man immediately took several remaining seedlings and, carelessly shaking them out of their pots, shoved them into the already dug holes. Lily's heart bled at the sight. He didn't bother to enrich the soil or carefully extract the roots. He just dumped the seedlings out. Delicate roots snapped and broke before her eyes as he ruthlessly packed them down with dirt. He brushed off his hands and didn't even bother to water the plants after transplanting. Then he turned to her, a triumphant smirk lighting up his face. 1, 2, done. A 2-minute job, he tossed out. We'll see how you handle yourself tomorrow.
Lily barely held back her tears as she watched the young peacock walk away. In one of the mansion's windows stood an elderly man, his father, Robert Lawrence, watching them. Then he turned away and disappeared into the depths of the house. The next morning, Lily stood by the flower bed, observing the plants that had been put in yesterday. Her heart sank with bitterness at the sight of the unfortunate ones Edward had planted. The flowers that were full of life yesterday were now slightly wilted. They weren't dead yet, but they were weak and slowly dying. Lily knew that this was what stress from improper transplanting looked like.
Sighing, she thought about how long she had studied to be a gardener and landscaper. She remembered spending years mastering the nuances of the profession, studying agronomy, botany, floriculture, soil science, and dendrology. Caring for every plant was an entire art form to her. Currently, she worked as a hired gardener. She had been preparing to plant these petunias since February, growing the seedlings, feeding them, monitoring the temperature and soil moisture, and in the final days before transplanting, hardening the young plants by taking them out into the fresh air for several hours. She had put so much effort, so much care into them, and how foolishly it had all been ruined yesterday. That arrogant peacock just stuck them in the dirt. Lily clenched her lips, remembering his mocking, poking a shovel in the ground. He still dared to claim her work was a trivial matter. Such somber thoughts swirled in her head as she looked at the fading flowers. Edward stepped out of the mansion wearing a flawless suit with a tie perfectly knotted at his neck. His polished shoes gleamed. Following behind him, Robert Lawrence walked out slowly. Seeing Lily, Edward approached and broke into a self-satisfied smile. He glanced briefly at the flower bed. "Good morning," he said mockingly. "The night has passed and the flowers haven't withered. That means they've taken root. What do you have to say to that?" Lily looked up at him. "It's too early to tell," she said quietly. "I'm not interested in your gardening philosophy." His voice sounded sharp. "I handled your job. Now it's your turn. Today, important guests will arrive at the mansion for a charity evening. They are all walking wallets. You will come and convince them to part with their money for a good cause. My father and I run a charitable foundation to support orphans in our city. So I'll expect you at exactly 8 o'clock. At that moment, Edward's father approached them. Frowning at the uneven row of flowers by the path, he asked, "Lily, why is this last row planted so carelessly?" The young gardener hung her head guiltily and blushed. She felt ashamed of the poor quality work, even though it wasn't hers. Edward looked at his father. "I planted those," he said nonchalantly. "I proved to this arrogant girl that I can do her trivial job. We have a bet. Now it's her turn. We'll see how she handles her part of the deal." And casting a triumphant look at Lily, he headed toward his car. As soon as the black sports car disappeared behind the gates, Robert Lawrence let out an elderly grunt. His face no longer held a frown, only a quiet, sad focus. He looked at the flower bed, at the fading flowers. "So, what is this bet my son mentioned?" he asked. Lily lowered her gaze. "I think I've lost it," she replied softly, not daring to look up. The old man waited patiently, and Lily told him everything. How Edward stepped on the seedlings, how he mocked her labor, and how they made a bet that if he succeeded in planting, she would give a speech at the social gathering. Robert Lawrence listened intently, his face growing more serious. He stood silently, as if weighing something, and then without looking at Lily, he spoke as if thinking out loud. "He is a good person, but he is still so young. He doesn't understand much. He devalues the work of others while believing he is indispensable." He raised his head and looked at Lily. "He could use a little lesson." "That's for sure," Lily joined in fervently. "His arrogance should be taken down a notch for his own good." "You're thinking correctly, Lily," the old man smiled. "And perhaps you can help me with that. You will go to tonight's event and give a speech, one that will set hearts on fire." Lily looked at the old billionaire, stunned. Her eyes widened in surprise. "But how can I go?" She pointed helplessly at her work clothes. "In these gardener's overalls? In this straw hat? Or should I wear a summer sundress? Which of these wealthy people will listen to a simple girl? And besides, what would I even say to them?" "Leave that to me," Robert Lawrence smiled mysteriously. "Just agree, and together we will show my son." An hour later, an old Rolls-Royce pulled up smoothly at the entrance of one of the city's most expensive boutiques. Lily, still dazed, got out of the car, and Robert Lawrence gestured for her to follow him inside. They were expected. A stylish, stern woman, the boutique owner, and 2 young, energetic stylists were waiting. "Please, help this young lady," said Robert Lawrence. "Make her the most beautiful of them all." The stylists set to work without asking unnecessary questions. While one worked magic on her hair, the other applied makeup.
turning her face into a delicate canvas. Lily felt like a doll being dressed for an important role she wasn't ready for. She was so nervous her hands were shaking. "Tell me, Lily," Robert Lawrence addressed her softly. "Why do you love your work so much? What is so special about it?" Lily thought for a moment, looking at her reflection in the mirror. "I feel a sense of peace from making the world better. When I plant a seed, I know it can grow into a beautiful flower. I put my work and my soul into it. I care for it, protect it from the wind and the cold, and it rewards me with beauty and fragrance." "And if it doesn't grow?" the old man asked, watching her closely. "I try to do everything so it doesn't die. But even if it does," Lily sighed, "I don't give up. I find ways to protect it, move forward, and plant new ones." Robert Lawrence smiled. "You are very wise, Lily, and you are right. True beauty and success are the results of labor and patience. My son doesn't understand that. He's used to everything coming easily." At that moment, the stylist draped a silk fabric over Lily's shoulders. "Look at this dress," she said. "It will look stunning on you."
Lily looked at the dress. It was the color of the midnight sky, adorned with hundreds of tiny rhinestones resembling a meteor shower. Her heart skipped a beat with delight. For the first time in her life, she saw such beauty. It was like a dream. "It suits you so well, Lily," Robert Lawrence said with admiration. By this time, the stylists had finished their work. A completely different girl looked back from the mirror, with sparkling eyes, a gentle flush, and perfectly styled hair. The final touch was an elegant fascinator veil that partially covered her face, adding mystery and intrigue to her look. "Well, Lily," said Robert Lawrence, "how do you feel?" Lily looked at her reflection, her heart racing. "I'm nervous," she replied. "And do you know what you'll talk about?" "You will speak about orphans, about those who lack love. You will tell them that they are like flowers that need care and help, and you will show our guests how important that is." Lily nodded. "Are you ready?" "Yes," she answered. "Then let's go." The shimmering lights of the mansion, like stars, were scattered across the evening park. Sitting in the vintage Rolls-Royce, Lily felt her heart pounding and her palms sweating. She felt like an imposter in this world of glitz and wealth, but remembering Robert Lawrence's words, a spark of determination ignited in her heart. The car door opened. The wealthy old man, grunting, stepped out first and extended his strong, sinewy hand to help the lady out of the car. Lily took a deep breath, and together they headed toward the main entrance of the mansion where other guests were arriving. As they entered the grand hall, the guests, all wealthy individuals, set down their glasses and ceased their conversations. They turned toward the host, who entered arm in arm with a breathtaking stranger. A whisper swept through the room. "Who is she? Who is that lady?" Edward, handsome and self-assured, was stunned. He saw his father leading a woman who looked like a goddess. Her dress, the color of the midnight sky and woven of silk with hundreds of tiny stars, shimmered in the light. The veil hid part of her face, making it impossible for him to recognize who was behind it. Her gait was graceful, and her head was held high with pride. Intrigued, Edward approached them. "Welcome," he said, bowing gallantly to kiss her hand. "May I have the honor of knowing yours?" Lily only offered a mysterious smile. "This lady prefers to maintain the intrigue," Robert Lawrence answered for her, a mask of noble pride fixed on his face. The guests took their reserved seats as the first chords of the piano rang out. The invited star, a famous pianist, began his performance. Robert Lawrence led Lily to their table, with Edward sitting beside them, his eyes alight. He couldn't take his gaze off the beauty, still failing to recognize Lily. "I didn't think I would meet such a magnificent creature today," he whispered. Lily turned away, listening to the exquisite music, but Edward wouldn't stop. "Let me entertain you with a funny story that happened to me and hasn't left my mind. Imagine, I made a bet with a peculiar girl, a gardener. She promised to show up tonight and give a speech. At one point, I even hoped she wouldn't chicken out so we could all have a good laugh at her ridiculous straw hat. But as I thought, she got scared." His words, full of arrogance, stung Lily sharply. "And it looks like I'll have to deliver the speech to the guests myself," Edward chuckled. When the musical portion of the evening ended and the artist stood to bow to the guests' applause, Lily leaned slightly toward the old billionaire and said softly, "Robert Lawrence, if you and your son permit, I would like to address the guests." Edward, astonished, looked at his father. The older man nodded with a smile.
Please, my dear, as you wish." Lily rose and walked toward the stage under the surprised gazes of everyone present. Her heart beat like a trapped bird, but she was full of determination. She felt 100 eyes fixed on her. Her knees shook, but she grit her teeth and took a step toward her fear. She had to show them, and especially that puffed-up peacock Edward, that money isn't everything in life. As she stepped onto the improvised stage, she lifted her veil and spoke. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Do you know how important it is to put your soul into your work? As a gardener, I know that every sprout, every seed needs love, care, and attention. Without it, growing into a beautiful flower is very difficult. If you simply stick it in the ground without taking the trouble to spread the roots, without fertilizing it or watering it, it will likely wither. Similarly, a child who is not surrounded by care in childhood withers and turns into an unhappy and often lonely person. Like a flower deprived of care, they will seek a way out in the darkness. Every orphan in our city requires our help and love. If we provide these children with support today, tomorrow we will see them bloom before our eyes, just like flowers planted in fertile soil. It is for these beautiful moments that we have gathered here tonight." As she spoke about how love can save children and give them hope, she saw out of the corner of her eye how Edward's face dropped. He finally recognized her, the dirty flower girl, and his eyes widened in shock. When Lily finished, the hall gave her a standing ovation. The girl stood on stage, embarrassed, not knowing what to do next. At that moment, Edward approached her. He took her hand and helped her down. "I admit, you have defeated me utterly," he said. "I have never met such an irresistible woman. I am ready to do anything for you, Lily. I am ready to change for you."
Lily, smiling, pulled her hand from his palm. "You didn't defeat me, Edward. You defeated your own prejudice. And you shouldn't change for me, but for yourself," she said calmly, looking him straight in the eye. "Only then will you become a truly strong and worthy man." The patrons, moved by Lily's speech, approached the old billionaire to make donations. Robert Lawrence proudly shook the strong hands of his old acquaintances, tapping them warmly on the shoulder as they generously wrote checks for large sums of dollars to the charity fund. The next day, Lily stood before the flower bed again in her gardening overalls and straw hat. She looked sadly at the completely withered flowers. Edward approached her. He was wearing simple jeans and a shirt. His arrogance was gone. He looked at the dead plants. "Lily, I see I lost," he said with sincere regret. "And again, you were right. Everything I planted has died. You put in so much effort, and I destroyed them so recklessly. Will you ever forgive me?" Lily smiled gently. "I knew how it would end that very day. I have spare flowers, and I brought them with me today. If you find the time, I can show you how to plant them correctly." Edward looked up at her, hope gleaming in his eyes. "For you, I will always have time." They leaned over the flower bed, learning to work together, the Bardenu girl and the young wealthy man. Meanwhile, from his office window, Robert Lawrence, sipping his morning coffee, watched them with a smile. He grunted with satisfaction, looking at his son, who had finally learned a life lesson. He understood that growing flowers would likely never be Edward's true calling, but if his son wasn't a fool, a girl as brave, smart, and kind as Lily could become a reliable anchor in his life. The old man truly hoped that the flowers the young people planted today would bloom, just like their relationship, proving that true beauty and success are the results of labor and patience. Please write if you enjoyed my story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. A new story will be released here in just a couple of days. Don't miss it.